Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Portals of Perception conversation. I'm here with Aviv, and today we're going to be talking about process design and orienting our mind, body, and being to be fully prepared to show up as a way of being in life, and also in the moments when we need to have access to our fullest capacities. How can we best orient ourselves physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually to be able to show up and be of service to what we're being called into in service to the greater unfolding of humanity. So really an honor and a joy to be here with you.
Yes, an exciting prospect to explore. Just to stay with the question first, if you needed to frame from yourself, how is it current, and how will that how is that arising and relevant in your own endeavor? Just give me some grounding, and then what I can offer will be even more in context.
Well, it's relevant to me because I really, from what I've heard and from what I know about what you're up to in the world, I really aspire to be doing similar work in the world, holding space for people who are holding spaces that are transformative, catalyzing, healing, and create a space for new possibilities and new futures to emerge is what I understand is part of what you do. And so I aspire to do this work and currently do this work, and would like to explore other contexts that I can convene these kinds of gatherings and also learn from you as you've been doing this a lot longer than I have. How do you get yourself ready? How do you show up into a space? What have you learned from doing this for decades now, from a lifetime career, and how could that inform what each of us are wondering into ourselves and together moving forward?
All right, that's a full menu. So I think the first thing to say is each and every one of us, we're wired differently. So I can share all my experience openly, and you will have to find out for yourself what is your way, and you are finding out for yourself what is your way. And so I look at this as a dialogue, as a discovery conversation where we can learn from each other, because you will bring to the table strength and perspective that I don't have. So I'd say that right at the outset. Then perhaps what I can do is first put it in the broader context, like the backstory of the space, which is process design, process choreography, preparation for holding spaces and gatherings, all sorts. So that's the space you're inquiring about. Place it first inside the bigger context, then place it in the situational context of the last few weeks, and then talk about the specifics of how I'm right now, mid-flight, preparing to two major events this weekend and the weekend to follow with a large global group, and what are the processes that, and the inquiries and the preparations that I instigate in myself, almost like the way an Olympic athlete will prepare themselves to be in peak performance, in peak zone, in the peak access point on game day, on game time. So that's kind of the arc that I propose to travel through. How is that as a... I just map the process that I'm about to go through. So that's part of what I do. I map the pathway, and then I go in the pathway, and often going in through the pathway is actually opening and discovering the pathway.
Yeah, beautiful.
Okay. So elsewhere on Portals, actually on the first event, when we discussed listening with presence, I shared a story of something that happened when I was 12, 13, when I was leading an activity with a group of youngsters as part of a youth movement, and where I discovered that all of a sudden a certain sensitivity, a certain faculty, certain capacity to read the energy of a group got switched on. I didn't have the language at the time, so I didn't know what it was that I was actually sensing and reading, but all of a sudden I became present to a certain awareness. And I shared how that happened and what I did with that. So that can be found on portals if you trace to listening with presence. What I'll say about it in the context of the inquiry now is that really begins for me age 12, 13, a lifelong journey. So I'm now almost 50 years later. I have been on that journey nonstop and practically, probably have always been either preparing for a certain activity, a certain group process that I was leading, or leading that group process, or after it, debriefing what happened, what worked well, what will I learn from it. Perhaps the only 2 years that it was more in the background and I didn't really fully do it was the 2 years I was trained as a fighter pilot. And even there, I was doing various activities, even through the course, through the training course. So we are now talking 50 years, some phases with very intense hours of preparation or multi-day process of many hours with groups of people. I only say that because Malcolm Gladwell says you need 10,000 hours to develop a mastery in a certain domain. I tried to calculate that a year ago. I'm probably somewhere in the 35, 40, 45, 50,000 hours. It depends how you calculate it. And if you integrate into it the idea that you allow your system to sometimes be in meditative exploration, even when it's not in the foreground, the numbers probably will go beyond that. So that's the bigger context. We're talking about a science and art that, quote unquote, I mean, there are in the world all sorts of courses about facilitations and facilitation techniques and plenty on that. But the spaces that we are about to discuss, mostly I've had to discover by trial and error, falling on my face, making mistakes, mostly burning myself out, doing something that I didn't have the development or the resilience or the capacity to actually hold a space, and then recalibrating, healing, redeeming myself in the process. That essentially has been the journey. And now we are talking about 30 and more years doing this professionally, 35 years doing it professionally, for a few decades first in the personal growth, personal development arena, and then for now 2.5, 3 decades in the corporate arena, high-end strategy events with some of the largest, most admired companies in the world, high risk, high visibility, high paying circumstances. You've got to deliver the goods. So these are very different circumstances. They require a different set of skills. But I mention this because some of the infrastructure, process infrastructure, mental infrastructure, resiliency infrastructure, the sixth sense, the clairvoyant, telepathy, energy reading of a group, all those capabilities, all those that are a lifelong learning and discovery, they work in different, they get applied in different settings in different ways. So that's the big, or the stepping back, the backstory. The more near term is, so I found myself at the end of August with 4 major events, corporate events, 3 with leading teams in Silicon Valley, major companies, and now 2 events with a global community, a couple of hundred people, where I've been with them on a journey for now a year and a half into a certain body of work, which we call the Epoch Culmination story. And I'm preparing for these 2 weekends. And so where I found myself, the reason I highlight, because it will not always be so dense, But the back-to-back, because I need space. I need space in between processes. But I didn't have on this occasion, so I needed to, late August, early September, activate what I call the Robert Peary strategy. When he decided he was going to get to the North Pole, he sent out in front of him teams to create storage provision areas along the journey so that he himself could travel as light as he could possibly travel, and these other teams serve the purpose. By the way, what a beautiful devotional, I take this as a metaphor. You and I have talked about this idea of starting to build a cathedral, knowing that only 2 or 3 generations later your grandson will walk into the completion of the cathedral. In this case, some people participated in the effort. They did not personally reach the North Pole. We don't know of them by name because they were in some of those early forerunning teams, but they supported a bigger cause of the human adventure, of unlocking a new possibility. And I think about these stories. I play these stories many, many times in my mind because I think to myself, Forrest, we are all perhaps our forerunners for something else, for somebody else that will follow us. And I call over this story in my mind because it's not about, for me, it's not about getting to the North Pole. I mean, it's not about ultimately me reaching some final destination. It's about the recognition that there are capacities and capabilities that's activating at this time for humanity. I happen to be playing in the arena that you're playing in, the process facilitation, the process choreography, the process design, the convening spaces arena. And it's a very important arena because if we are to evolve as a species, well, we can't do it just on our own, or what we can get to on our own is limited. So we need to facilitate congregations, gatherings, where we enable those kind of processes and capabilities. So Robert Peary for me is a practical mental model for preparing myself when I have several events, because in this case, I send my provisions ahead of schedule, ahead of time, and I park some of the things because, for example, the 2 events, the 2 weekends I'm about to lead, there is the preparation I'm doing this week, but there was certain preparation. The beginning of my preparation had to take place 8 weeks and 6 weeks because it's like, again, my best metaphor is the Olympic athlete. You don't just get ready a week or 10 days before to be in shape. There are certain calibrations and contemplative spaces, muscles, spiritual muscles, mental muscles. You need to warm up for the journey. You can't just say, okay, in 3 months I'm going to climb the Everest. No, you need to start the climb and the practice right here, right now. And so this was the preparation, and I completed those events. And by the way, when I talk about preparation, in a minute I'll go into much greater specificity. It's not just the concepts. It's not just the content. The content and the concepts is the easy part. The energetic, the psychological, the stamina, the space, the vessel that we will hold, all that is not a 5 minutes or a 5 hours or a 5-day work. Not for me, not in the way I have developed by trial and error this science, this art. So huge run up, and yes, certain endeavors, certain workshops will take 2 months in preparation, let alone needing to onboard the people and do the discovery conversation. That's when you do the work in the corporate space. In the non-corporate space, there is something similar, which is the exchange and the correspondence and some of the questions and the promotions from participants. So how do I wind into those spaces? And also the difference between the different domains that I'm going to be working inside of. The metaphor there, if you're a violin player, you're playing the violin, and you are going to next month do the double concerto, the Bach double concerto, you are in one zone in yourself, because Bach will get out of you the mentality part, and you need to be almost mathematically exact in yourself. But then if you're going to do the Mendelssohn or the Tchaikovsky or the Brahms, you'll have to have access of a different kind, because the mood is different, the sentiments are different. Technically, it may be easier or more difficult. But if you're a vessel, if you're a conduit for a certain domain of realizations, ideas, insights, perceptions, healing, the core idea is, I never assume that I'm ready for the event. I never assume that I can just wake up in the morning and go and do it. I always assume that I need to do the preparatory work. That's my foundational starting point. Aviv, you are not ready to do this. This is too big an undertaking for you just to think that you can roll out of bed and do it. The ethics of the situation, the integrity of the opportunity, the respect you have for the people you engage with, the respect you have for the craft of your life require you to be in inquiry mode, in discovery mode for several weeks in advance, and then wind into the fine sensitivity on the final approach. So let me pause here, because that's still the kind of the backstory and the background, and let's let you riff on this and how it come across, and build on this, or ask anything about this part, and then we'll wind into greater specificity.
Yeah, well, what I love about what you're sharing is I'm hearing this balance of, number one, you mentioned it's a science and an art, and what came up for me when you said that was, and also a way of being, in the sense that the more and more we show up in this kind of way in the world professionally, the more the boundaries sort of dissolve, and this just becomes who we are in life. And that being true, also, when the Olympics are coming up, how do you prepare physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually to be able to perform it at full capacity in the moment that it's needed for you to show up in that light? So I'm really enjoying the blend of it being a way of being in a way that's omnipresent, in a way, like you're never not coming from this place, and also balancing the rhythm and the choreography of life's animating, energetic pulse of when is the time for peak and when is the time for rest, and attuning to that rhythm and that flow.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I agree with the choice of words about a way of being, and about ultimately being in the state of flow. And like, it's easy for me to access this content right now, because I'm in the flow. So we're catching the wave. I'm riding the wave already, because in 48 hours, I'm going to be inside that process, and I'm actually almost ready for it now. Just there is, by the way, this, okay, when you're ready, how do you stay on the wave and not lose the wave? And when we spend a few months of the year down in Florida, I just love watching the people riding the waves. I don't do it myself on a board. I do body surfing, and I love that. And the metaphor and the experience is eternally valid and right, because when you see those experts and they ride the wave, you can be prepared and choreographed in advance, but then you're in the moment. Because the wave makes its own move, and you need to move forward on the board or backward, and some of them stand on their heads while they're on the board and do all sorts of fun stuff. So there is mastery in it as well. So it's an art and a science and a way of being, and also a mastery, a domain mastery that's arising in all of these. Part of the tools that I use is you'll see me doing that on a number of other conversations on portals, and as we go along in our mutual discovery, you'll see me do that more often than not. Is what I call loom processes. So at the loom, the preparatory loom that I'm describing now, we'll talk first about number one, grounding myself in the core sentiments, the core reasons, the core purposes. Sometimes we will call this the why, the guiding, the inspirational why. That's space one. Space two will involve more the core insights, the fundamental insights that I have about the situation I'm moving into, the human condition, and therefore the requirements of the situation. And then number three, I move into the how. You see, in too many places in the world, in too many fields and spaces, people skip all that, which for many will sound like, whoa, you are so heavy, taking so much time in preparation, what's going on? Can't you lighten up? Can't you get directly to it? Actually, I can, but I choose not to, because I have discovered that by slowing down, you actually accelerate the outcome. You slow down to accelerate impact and accelerate what it is you're looking to produce. The shortcut to how, the impatience of tell me how, is dangerous. I've learned that it's dangerous in my Air Force training. If you cut corners, you crash on the runway, or you crash on the approach to landing. Because why? Because you did not follow the correct protocols of approach to landing. You're trying to cut the corner. So I'll talk about the why, the sentiments, the reasons, the purposes, some core understandings about the human condition, and then the specificity of how I design and approach the convening and conducting an event like this, and what do I go into an inside of in myself. Okay, so space one. I have to truly ground myself in the why I'm doing this. What are the core sentiments? Not in the words of it, but in the living being sense of it. So in this case, this is not a corporate client. This is a global community I've been involved with for many years. So the why for me is I am seeking to offer facilitation and encouragement to the whole person, liberation of everybody involved. The whole person, liberation and development and evolution. And there is an accent on the evolutionary process. There is an accent in recognizing that we humans are now participating in the bigger game. The bigger game you and I have discussed last week when we talked about the evolutionary process underway. So that's for me the big why. And so if that's the why, if that's the core sentiment, it's insufficient that I just know it. I need to find today the currency, what's alive in me about it today. How am I revitalized and refreshed about it? It's not just having the right words. It's having the inner reverence and the felt sense of the significance of how privileged I am to participate at this time in the arena with others who are together seeking. To say what the bleep is going on with humanity at the moment. And how is it part of the bigger trace of the last 3,000 years, 400 years, 60 years? Where are we moving into? So that's number one. Then number two, I need to ground myself in, as I said, the core insights of the human condition. And what does it mean if I say I want to be useful? and productive in convening and facilitating a specific workshop process or meditation process or contemplative process or art and expression discovery process, or, which is more the case in this occasion, a combination of all of the above, with a core developmental element being the central unifying principle. Okay, so when I think about that inquiry, it takes me to the following realization. I just said I want to be as impactfully and meaningfully facilitative for the liberation of the evolutionary process in other people. Now the question I'm asking, what are the core insights that I need to take into account when I shape the approach to that challenge, to that conundrum? Well, there are many, and we could talk about that for 40 hours, but to sample a core one. A core observation is that people often approach development from a place of absence, from the place of outage, from the place of shortage, what they are missing, the pain point. Nothing wrong with that. And I, by the way, covered some of that content on a conversation with Ofer on a discussion about the anatomy of balance. So that can be traced a lot more than I will say about it here and now. But the problem with approaching your development from the point of outage, from the lack, from where you see yourself distant from where you hope to be, is that you, by definition, then approach your journey from a place that's divorced from your essence, divorced from your core. And as I hear what I said, I recognize that I needed to place another scaffolding before I said that. That scaffolding may not be necessary for you, but may be necessary for somebody listening to the conversation. So my core fundamental, even before saying what I was about to say there, is to say, okay, so I come into I'm about to convene an endeavor for 4 days with a group of 200 people, but it's not just 200 people. Every person is a community unto themselves. They will show up brain and mind and mentality. These are 3 different parts of the orchestra within, and they require different processes and different facilitation. And in a minute, when I talk about the specifics of what we are going to go into, I'll demonstrate why it is important. And they have their emotions and their desires and their hopes and their aspirations and their pain and their trauma and their shadow that they are grappling with, and they have their professional experience, and they have their astrological inclination, and they have the personality type. All those are part of the cosmology of each and every person. And if you say, whoa, that's too much information, that can be system overload, yes. Or it says to me, so if you want to be effective into the whole and into each and every person, to the degree that you can, you need to line yourself up to the most core universal aspects of the human experience. Because we are all those inner members of the community that we each are, including the soul and the spirit, 2 very important energetic structures that are part of the anatomy of who we each are as a person. And if we want to talk to those different capacities, capabilities, opportunities, development spaces, I have to be, as much as I can, and I'm a human being on a development journey myself, I haven't quote unquote arrived. So it will never be perfect, but to the degree that I can, I need to wind into the greatest depth of what is universal for us humans at this time in the human experience on this beautiful, tormented place we call Earth, such that if I'm deeply immersed in that place, there may be something that will be relevant for each and every person. Not that it is my responsibility to make it relevant for each person in a way that will make them happy. It's partly the responsibility of each person if they walk into the space. But I want to be as diligent, as thorough, as complete in the fidelity of my preparation. So I will take myself through in this preparatory of one, cloister preparatory of one, like entering the preparatory cloisters of preparation for something like this, to go through all those layers of meditative, contemplative inquiry in myself. And when I do so, I talked about how the trap that we often find for many people in the world, we approach development from outage, from weakness. So, and I know deeply that that is natural in one way because of the human condition, but flawed in another way because it means you're going to build the tower of your development on a shaky foundation, and that actually part of the core elements, fundaments of development is, if you're going to be effective with people in a meaningful and sustained way, your first job is to help them get regrounded, retethered to their natural essence, which is very different from people who work with groups of people who would forever distance people from the core to build dependency. That's to do with the guru trap. One of the guru traps is building dependency. We hinted to that, and I said we'll have that another time as another conversation. I don't want to go down that path because A, it's not the objective, B, I don't have the psychological nor the financial need to build dependency, and in an even more profound way, I understand deeply, as you and I have discussed, that the breakthrough of this time is found in that co-creative, collaborative space where there may be somebody who is a few steps further up the road, but even that metaphor is a little too crude because, yeah, we are different places on the mountain of the human experience, but actually, what do you know? You are bringing online something that we all need so much, because without you, something, certain skill, a certain talent, a certain sensitivity, a certain awareness is missing in the cosmology. So this thing is not hierarchical and not linear. It's a shape-shifting, moving diagram. It's much more like bird murmuration or fish in their as a flock as they swim, and every moment they turn and somebody else is in the cutting edge leading the movement forward. That maybe is sometime at least a better metaphor. So knowing that, still I am the quote-unquote main Sherpa for the process. That's how I think of what I do. And so a core fundament that I will travel to is, what can we do? Two things we have to do on the front end. We have to create space, because the biggest challenge today for people is we are all so crowded. We are all so full of so much noise. If we're going to be able to make some new development headways, before we make the development headways, we need to create the space inside of which we may be able to make that travel. So a huge big part of the work is to create that spacious space, and then build into the choreography of the process the facility for people to get retethered, regrounded to themselves, such that whatever we proceed into, people have had a chance to sense to their essence. And by the way, when I talk about get retethered to your natural essence, I am not talking about necessarily just accessing how you feel in this moment. How you feel may be a byproduct of 70 other things, including what you had for breakfast, where you were yesterday, other major influences in your life. When I talk about grounding and tethering to your natural essence, I'm talking about something quite different. And it's not necessarily a 5 minutes or an hour process, but at least in the architecture of the process, we would like to honor that fact that we're here, a gathering of self-electing individuals, each agent of our own process, have full agency and sovereignty of who we are, or at least practicing to gain full agency and sovereignty of who we are. And part of that agency begins by and through the capacity to source your natural essence and the gifts that you brought with you to this life, and then engage with the project, your development project, as part of the greater human development project. Because there is our each personal project, the pattern we're working on, the issue we're working on, and then we are part of the bigger human development and evolutionary project. So I would ground my deliberation in some of those sentiments and reasons and insights. And only then do I begin the journey to the content, okay? If I hotwire to the content, it's too easy. So the content, because the content is the foreground, but why the content is a trap, because, or can be a trap, because I don't want to do the journey just with people's brains or just with people's minds. I want to facilitate a throughout whole person journey. I want it to become a felt experience. I want to lead us to a vista and then leave us there suspended for a while with music playing in the background, staring into the distance. And we will do this sometime in a meditative way or contemplative way or artistic way as we develop the journey. Okay, but then I do need to attend to the content, because the content is important too, because we are creatures of the 20th and 21st century. We want to know what's in it for us, what will we learn, what are the new insights and perceptions and all that. So then it depends where I am in the content. So like on this occasion, there's several questions that came my way based on the journey so far. And you like it because it's an area you've been exploring and doing work in. So there are a couple of questions coming my way about shadow work. But shadow work inside the context of the broader personal growth work, personal development work. Okay, so now I think to myself, there is tremendous amount of know-how and knowledge in the public domain about shadow work by great luminaries and experts. And I'm going to be approaching this work on this occasion a little differently. And I'm not going to go into the content at the moment, by the way, because the content actually is in containment. I have to keep it in its unused, contained space, so that when we embark on the journey, it's first time for me and first time for everybody else. This is not going to be anything I've ever done before. I've never gone through the process I'm going to lead. It's going to have that emergent nature of discovering on point how it wants to configure itself, or else it's not interesting and we are not riding the wave. But there is plenty preparation I actually make to get to be able to be in that space. And on this occasion, I will probably place a much larger loom of considerations and place shadow work as only the 5 or 10% of the broader arena that we have to explore. And then I'll go deep inside it to address the questions after I put it inside a bigger context. So it's a context within a context within a context. You'd say, why is all this important? Because the human is designed in this way, and if we want to create and access the fullest potential of what it is that we are looking to access, we have to see something inside the bigger picture. Like if I want to understand you, I'll ask about you, then I'll ask about the house around you, then I'll ask about your town, then I'll ask your family about your family and your network, then I'll ask about your upbringing and the conditions in which you journeyed into life. And the further I will expand the picture, the greater the insight I will have. And then I'll be able to journey back to ask about Forrest and what's uniquely emerging with Forrest at this time. So all that is in the preparation of the content, but here comes the catch that I was driving to. I then need to travel in my mind some of that content and anticipate where will there be difficulties and why. And can I disarm some of these minds in advance? Can I actually be the expedition clearing the path by energetically, psychologically disarming some of the difficulties? So how you do that now we're getting into realms that are almost difficult to translate to language. I've never ever spoken about this before, but you partly use yourself to travel into the space, and you use your access to the collective psyche of the people you're working with and humanity at large, and your study of that domain, and you become aware of the where there are charge points, where there are explosives that could be tripped in the process. And you can't avoid it all, you can't prevent it all, because what will happen, but you can be as prepared, and you can actually disarm some main points. And then you can do that to at least create in yourself the conditioning of how you will walk that path. So for example, there is a particular segment in the journey that we will get to where I will have to say to people in this process, it's very important that in this next segment, I will do this slowly but swiftly. Because we shouldn't be listening to it from our brains. We should be listening to it from our minds, because the brain will want to catch and stop in any little minutia that I don't understand. And if you start processing all the details and the minutia, you lose the forest, you lose the biggest picture. We don't want to lose Forrest, we have Forrest here. And you want to get the overview of the territory. First, you want to get the overview of the territory and its imprint, almost the aerial view, and only then go deep. Because if you get to engage with the brain rather than the mind, you will lose the bigger picture. And you will literally trip yourself in the process of the discovery, and you get frustrated on the way because maybe there is a step that I went through in the step-by-step discovery that I will share that was not clear. So this is not me saying I will not engage questions, I will not address concerns. I will, but there will be certain segments that I have to do like in one flow. So we get the overview and then we go into the specifics. These are some of the, it's like, not to compare because I'm not at that level, but you know, the beauty of the recent Olympics when Simone Biles said, I'm pulling out, because for me to do all these spins up in the air when I have that condition, I may lose the sense of where I am in space, and I may land on my head. It's dangerous. So I don't think what I'm doing is that dangerous. Although, for all intents and purposes, we're dealing with people's lives and emotions and feelings and my own too. So part of being proficient in your preparation and masterful in your preparatory work is not being perfect, but being diligent to not leave any stone unturned that you could have turned, such that you are truly a servant leader to what it is you're trying to facilitate in the people around you, and that you bring on board the awareness that just because you want to climb Mount Everest doesn't mean you will actually be able to get there. You need the provision, you need all the support infrastructure to do so, energetically, content-wise, and so on. So that's the preparation. I am in mid-flight as we speak in the last 2-3 days. And you asking about it now just provided an opportunity to access it in the moment, in a live way, in a way that we've never done before. So thank you very much.
There's a lot of nutrient dense material in that in that share. What I'm most drawn to is what you said you've never put into words and maybe have the hardest time describing, which is becoming aware and connecting into the psyche of the collective that you're working with, the consciousness of the collective you're working with, the consciousness of the whole. The way I would describe it is starting to create the neural synapses and neural pathways through which people can then go and traverse more easily in a collective and illuminate where the potential adhesions and snag points that might emerge, and potentially even resolve them before people gather and need to play them out in a space together.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Actually perform the healing before the healing needed to be performed. So people actually, in some part, it was addressed unconsciously before it became conscious.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Well, so here is the process mastery of this. We could talk about this for another hour or two. That actually will be for me unproductive to move into now, because that will force me to access content that I shouldn't be accessing right now, but in 48 hours. Mm-hmm. So that's part of same with Michael Phelps in the pool, or somebody that's going to run the 10K. They don't run the 10K all out 2 or 3 days before they need to produce that performance in the Olympic arena, because some of the content, the energetic content that they will have to access is aerobic work, but some is anaerobic, and some is content that was stored over a period of 3 or 4 months. Mm-hmm. So there is content that I've been building, energetic content that I've been building for now 2 or 3 months. Mm-hmm. I shouldn't be accessing it today. It should be released for the first time when we are live at that point in time in the process with a group of people. So we can talk about it another time in the future.
Yeah, let's do that. And this is perfect, because I'd love to transition a little bit maybe into like in terms of you and me, where are we now and where might we be going? But before I do that, I just want to ask, do you, in your process, I mean, you talked about rooting in the core, the sentiments and reasons and purposes, and then the core insights and the how. I'm curious, do you celebrate at the end of a process? And if so, what does that look like, or how, is there any celebration in the unfolding of your work in the world and what you're offering? And
yeah, totally. It's a great question. I mean, the broader inquiry is celebration, rituals, ceremonies. How do they play a part? We celebrate and we ritualize at the beginning, in the middle, and in the end, and throughout. And there are celebrations in the collective, in the expression of gratitude and artistically and musically and so on. And then there are also celebrations that are very, very private, that one can choose to conduct with the sources that one is tethered to, and that inspires one's work, where if you're led and inspired by a certain communion, I'm going to use this word not in the Christian sense, but in the sense of you and that's something else that's with you when you do your work, and there is a partnership there. It's not a genuflecting relationship. It's not one party domineering, controlling the other party. It's a dialogue and a conversation of discovery. Then on the journey and at the conclusion, there are utterances of gratitude and reverence and appreciation and celebration that are very important, because the realms we are talking about, the refined realms of human perception and human connection and communion, they require courtesies and they require profound sensitivities. It's like, imagine that it's like a mansion, and in a special mansion you don't just walk from the kitchen to the dining room to the bathroom to the living room to the recreation room. Every chamber has its purpose, and so there are corridors between one to another, and the corridors represent the transformation that you will go in yourself, of how you show up in one space and how you will show up in another space. And when you travel those interior spaces, the way you travel those interior spaces is through rituals and alignment practices and prayers and devotions and all of the above. So this is like a beautiful arena and space to spend much time discovering and describing. It's all part of the journey of discovery and development of an enlightened and eminent self-leadership.
Well, I suppose we're going to have to leave that one for another. As much as I feel my just tentacles of curiosity wanting to go there, I feel like that's another hour or two of exploration.
Yeah, we have the rest of our life, and there is actually value and something intact and wholesome in staying in the main foray that we have gone into today, which was the various awarenesses that will go with process design, process choreography, and preparation.